I was having a look to see who Latina Calcio's next opponents were, and it's Taranto FC. And I saw the badge and I thought, well, I want to talk about that badge because it's got something to do with myth in it and it relates to ancient history. As ever, just to give you a bit of context, a bit of geography, this is Taranto. This is what it's known as now, though it had different names back in ancient history. So originally it was called Taras by the Greeks, and then it was called Tarentum by the Romans. And I'll come to that in a moment. But let's get back to that badge. I really like the badge, by the way. And you can see there's two main elements to it. You've got a dolphin and you've got a trident. So straight away you could probably make some associations there, at least one association. And that relates to Poseidon because you've got the trident. And you'd be correct in that. Because though there were, well, several in fact, myths involving the foundation of Taras, one of them relates to an individual called Taras, who was actually the son of Poseidon. So where does the dolphin come in all this? Well, we can look at a coin and understand this a bit more. This coin dates between 470 and 425 BC, and you've got both sides of it there, and this comes from Taras. On one side, you've got a character riding a dolphin. You can even see there's a really nice bit of detail there. There's a clamshell there as well. Well, that was Taras, or at least in one myth, because Taras was apparently rescued by a dolphin from a shipwreck, taken ashore, and that's where he founds the city. And actually that second side of the coin relates to that specifically, because here he's depicted as being the leader or the sort of founder of that colony which took his name. Again, just with a caveat that that's one version of the foundation myth of Taras, or Tarentum, or Taranto. Just a couple of other bits about Taras or Tarentum. Firstly, this was apparently founded by Spartans. So it was a Spartan colony in what was Magna Graecia, which is southern Italy, where you had a lot of Greek colonies. And in fact, it was responsible for a couple of other things. Apparently in the 5th century BC, it turned into democracy, which can't have been that appealing to any Spartans back home. But it had a big involvement to do with Rome, because Rome in the early 3rd century BC is starting to move southwards and get involved in everyone's business. And this included Magna Graecia, because you had a number of Greek colonies there, and they're all busy squabbling and doing the things that Greek colonies or Greek city-states would always do with each other. But at that point, Taras was one of the leading, it was one of the most important Greek colonies in southern Italy. And it didn't like the fact that Rome was starting to tread on its territory. So it actually invited over a general to come and sort out its affairs. And it actually had done this a number of times. Rather than build up its own army, it decided to recruit a general, mercenary general, and he would bring over his troops and he'd do the work for them. That wasn't a bad idea. And in this instance, it was a very famous general, one you may have heard of, called Pyrrhus. In the engagements with Rome, Pyrrhus brought something that the Romans had never fought against, and some of them probably had never seen before. That was the war elephant. So forget Carthage, forget Hannibal, that was later. It was Pyrrhus who actually introduced the war elephant into the western or central Mediterranean. And the Romans didn't quite know what to do with this new opponent. And it was pretty effective early on in some of the battles. In fact, it seems to have turned the tide, as it were. The Romans nicknamed the elephant the Lucanian oxen because it was actually in Lucania where they first came up against it. And it wasn't just here that the war elephant debuted, it did so on Sicily as well, again under Pyrrhus, this time fighting for the Greek city-states or Greek colonies there against the Carthaginians. And apparently it was here where the Carthaginians took note of this type of animal being used in that context. They didn't have access to the types of elephants that Pyrrhus most likely had, but they did have a species in North Africa, I think it's extinct now, the North African forest elephant, which is slightly smaller. And apparently that was the inspiration for them to start using that in their armies. And on the subject of Carthaginians, Hannibal had one of his few successes in the southern Italian peninsula at Taras, because he was able to take it through stealth. It was quite a clever little trick he deployed in order to take the city. He was unable to dislodge much of the Roman garrison, or at least a core unit of it, but he was still able to take the city. And again, that was one of his few successes in the latter part of his campaign on the Italian peninsula. This did actually lead me down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I found a few other badges of clubs in southern Italy and on Sicily that I think have got historical or mythological connections, and why not? I'll do a few videos on them as well. And until then, good luck against Taranto FC. Forza Latina.